Joining me now, I'd like to welcome the Secretary General of the Good Party, Bretto Herron. Brett, always good to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks very much for us.
No, absolute pleasure. Brett, 4 priorities that you have laid down, and I want to break them down within the 10 minutes that we have. You've mentioned something important about education, very interesting. You said that the sort of historic status quo where children receive inferior education, we're still seeing sort of remnants of that. And obviously we think back to apartheid and of course the Bantu education which was forced upon to children of color. Why has it taken so long for this to even be addressed from the government 32 years into democracy?
Well, I think it is something that the president must address this evening, because I think there are anti-transformation forces that have access to power and are interfering with the progress that we could make in the education space. We've celebrated the matric results or the national senior certificate results, that there's been an improvement year on year. But what we're not seeing behind that is that the no-fee schools, which are schools which would be schools for historically disadvantaged children, children from families of color, they are in the no-fee schools. And the matric results across all metrics for no-fee schools are not improving. And so what that shows us, if we really look at the data, is that historically disadvantaged children because of color remain disadvantaged in the current education system, because the no-fee schools are not delivering quality education and the same matric or national senior certificate outcomes that other schools are achieving.
Would that also include, and I know you haven't mentioned it in the priorities, the 30% pass mark? Now, Minister Siviwe Gwagube has mentioned that this cannot be done in terms of the sort of catering or going ahead and making it a popular statement. Popularism has made 30% the pass mark. How does Good Party look at it in that way?
Well, it's not technically true that 30% is the pass mark. 30% in some subjects enables you to pass the national senior certificate. But really what we should be focusing on is the quality of the education. And then you can make the pass mark 40 or 50%. It's really about the quality that learners are receiving. And our concern, as I indicate, is the disparate quality of education between more affluent communities, which are historically white communities, and communities of people of color, where the no-fee schools is an indication that we have not fully transformed our education system, because the results for kids who are in no-fee schools are worse than results for kids in other schools.
Brett, let's go to economic growth, human rights, and national security. So let's see how we can try and cram all of this. Economic growth, I remember last year there was the sort of push to get over 3% GDP growth. We're currently not at that at this moment. We're twiddling around the sort of 1% economic GDP growth. Realistically, can we see our economic growth going beyond the 2, maybe even 2.5%?
Well, government has got this new plan called GAIN, Growth and Inclusion Plan, and it is meant to grow the economy and achieve job creation. But I think the concern that we have, and what we'd like to hear from the president, is how GAIN is going to be implemented, and that we should not be aiming for a 3% growth rate. We need at least 5% growth annually over a sustained period of time if we're going to meaningfully reduce unemployment. In fact, if we were to achieve 5% economic growth over the next 15 years, in 15 years' time, we will still have nearly 9 million South Africans unemployed. So we will achieve improved employment stats, but in the actual numbers, there will still be 9 million adult South Africans wanting to work who will not find a job at 5% economic growth. So we need to aim higher than 3%, and we need to try and achieve at least 5% sustained over the next 15 years. At the same time, we cannot ignore that there are millions of South Africans who are unemployed without any income, and the Social Relief of Distress grant is not enabling them to feed themselves. And we have a very high level of hunger in South Africa. And so the president needs to address economic growth, but at the same time, the rights that South Africans have to support from the state while they are unable to sustain themselves.
Brett, you mentioned there the 370 SRD grant, 9 million jobless South Africans at this moment is hugely insufficient. So I'm going to quote it there. From a Good Party's perspective, what is it that you would like to see in terms of the SRD grant?
Well, the SRD grant needs to be converted to a basic income guarantee or basic income grant, and it should at least meet the food poverty line, which is currently 855 Rand per month. You may recall that 2 years ago we launched a campaign as the Good Party for a basic income grant, and we were saying that 1,000 Rand per month was affordable if the state undertook some fiscal realignment. And so actually we need to be guaranteeing an income that is above the food poverty line, and by our own research we can achieve at least 1,000 Rand per month.
I want to go to criminal justice. The Madlanga Commission has probably dominated the last 6 to 9 months. My question here, Brett, because given what we've been hearing in the Madlanga Commission, what we've been hearing in the ad hoc committee here in Parliament, is Good Party convinced that with this interim report that President Cyril Ramphosa has, there's going to be prosecutions happening? Actually, let me go a step back. A prosecution happening. Forget prosecutions, because what we saw with the Zondo Commission was very little of that happening.
I think the Madlanga Commission and the Ad Hoc Committee of Parliament is exposing the extent of the rot of the criminal justice system, from police officers, senior police management, allegations against the prosecuting authority themselves and the judiciary even. So there's a rot in the criminal justice system. We have a new National Director of Public Prosecutions, Advocate Andy Motibe,
Yes.
who was very, very successful at the SIU. And although he's only got a short term of office before he's compelled to retire, he brings the experience of driving a successful criminal justice institution, the SIU. There are problems in the criminal justice system in terms of the prosecuting authority not prosecuting, perhaps out of fear or favor.
Brett, I want to cut you there, because a lot of the problems that have been happening has been because of lack of funding. Advocate Shamila Batoy had complained about it a number of times. How does the president now look at this? Because prosecutions is the only way to actually hold those accountable. But if there's no funding, if the resources are lacking, then what's the point?
Well, exactly. So if we're going to have prosecutions, you mentioned the Zondo Commission, nothing has happened. Now we've got the Madlanga Commission, and there are cases that almost every South African knows about where we haven't seen a prosecution of anybody for corruption and state capture. Former President Zuma has managed to avoid court for nearly 2 decades. And so the National Prosecuting Authority must be properly resourced, financially and in terms of human resources. And there is unfortunately a lack of skill and a lack of experience when it comes to public finance crimes, the corruption crimes, the crimes where someone has breached or violated the Public Finance Management Act, or even the Municipal Finance Management Act. So public finance legislation needs to be a specific unit in the National Prosecuting Authority focused on corruption and breaches of public finance laws.
Housing is the fourth and last priority. That's been a huge challenge. RDP houses that have been obviously guaranteed by the previous administrations before that, since the dawn of democracy. What is the way forward with regards to that, Brett? Because still till today, many South Africans are without homes, and this was promised to them in the early 90s when the first dispensation came in.
Well, Chapter 2 of our Constitution is our Bill of Rights, and it gives the right to housing, along with a whole lot of other rights. And our government needs to see Chapter 2 of the Bill of Rights as a mandate. And there's an obligation to deliver decent, dignified public housing for the almost 2-3 million people in South Africa who are on the housing data demand or waiting list. But the problem with the delivery of housing is both the scale and the pace, and it's slowing down. And so we need a whole new approach to public housing. And we would say that it needs to be regarded as infrastructure. And government funds the building of infrastructure through long-term borrowings. And so we need to scale up our delivery of housing, fast track the delivery of housing, and change our mindset that it is a social benefit to it being a form of public infrastructure, and the manner in which we finance it needs to change so that we can speed up delivery.
Brett, this is the local government elections here, and of course the Good Party, you've got your representations within obviously the metros and various municipalities. What is the aim from the Good Party in terms of the challenge, especially within the city of Cape Town, where there's quite a large presence of that? Where does the Good Party see itself in terms of its challenging with regards to the metros, especially the big ones within South Africa and the municipalities?
I think for us, we've spoken about this before. The Good Party is in the process of working with Rise Mzansi and BOSA.
Yeah, Unite for Change.
And we're going to contest the local government elections as a united force with other parties under the brand Unite for Change. And bringing our skills and our talents and our members and supporters together, we hope to have a bigger impact in our towns and cities. And as we are described, we're hoping to unite South Africans so that they can experience real change in their lives. Local government is failing South Africans, and local government fails because there's poor leadership. And we're giving South Africans the opportunity through Unite for Change to change their leadership.
Here's the thing, a lot of the voters will look at, obviously, members like Musi Maimane, you've got Songezo Zibi, you've got Vuiso Ramokgopa, who's of course an MEC within the Gauteng government. Is there a huge weight of expectation from Unite for Change that at least having some sort of say within the coalition? Because I think we've had this conversation before. Coalitions are going to have a huge say in how metros are being run. So is that the expectation from many of your voters, the expectation from yourself, Rise Mzansi, and of course Build One South Africa, that a large chunk of the decision making within the metros will need to come from Unite for Change?
I mean, that is obviously part of our analysis, that in many towns and cities there will be coalitions. And we need to be part of those coalitions when it's the right fit for us. And what we're saying to voters is that you don't have to choose between your values and the things you believe in and capability. We will present candidates who can lead cities, who have the capability, and who share your values and your dreams and your vision for your city. So yes, we will be involved in coalition discussions after the elections where municipalities do not have, or where one party does not have an outright majority. And we will be able to contribute to those coalitions by putting up capable and ethical leaders.
Does Unite for Change have a long-term future beyond the 2026 local government elections?
So we focused on the 2026 local government elections, and we are confident that the project's going to work, and that will lead us into the 2029 general elections.
Brett, a lot of the discussions, I mean, you've been seeing what's been happening in Johannesburg now with the water crisis that has been occurring. From a Unite for Change perspective, and we had Vuiso Ramokgopa in our studio a couple of months ago, how do we solve issues like that? You've got this water crisis that is happening in Johannesburg. You've got electricity crisis where I'm from, Ekurhuleni, which has been plagued with so much of problems. Why are we still having these infrastructural challenges? I know you can't speak of that because you're not part of the coalition governments within those metros, but where does that lie? Because it seems to be a recurring problem 32 years into democracy.
Well, I mean, obviously there's been an underinvestment in infrastructure by these municipalities, and we need to look at municipalities and whether they are financially viable as standalone municipalities. There are many municipalities which don't have the rate base in order to support a large-scale investment in infrastructure, and that's where the national government needs to step in and support those municipalities if they are the way they've been demarcated by the demarcation board, if they don't have a decent rate space. But those municipalities that have a decent rate space, like Johannesburg, like Ekurhuleni, like Cape Town, which also has infrastructure problems, there's no excuse for not addressing your infrastructure backlog. And it comes down again to poor leadership. And voters elect that leadership. And we're saying as Unite for Change, if you elect capable and ethical leaders who are there to serve rather than be served, we can turn this around. And it really just takes ethical, capable leaders who are committed to turning it around, who understand that we need to invest in that infrastructure and understand that municipalities are able to raise the financing in order to do so.
Where are we in terms of leadership, Brett? you speak of a capable, ethical leadership, and this is what South Africans are calling for. When you speak to the ordinary South African on the street, that's all they're asking. They're asking for a leader that can solve the bread and butter issues, the issues that are a right within the Constitution, within the Bill of Rights: water, power, service delivery. It seems to be something that very few municipalities, maybe one or two, maybe three, if you look at the Auditor General's report in terms of clean audits, where are we in terms of that in South Africa? Because that is really where the citizens are asking the question: give us a leader that can solve our bread and butter issues.
Well, I think part of the problem, as I said, I mean, poor service delivery, poorly run municipalities is a result of poor leadership. And voters elect their leadership. And now in 2026, there will be a local government election and the opportunity to elect new leaders. To borrow from our new partners in Unite for Change, Rise Mzansi's slogan, we need new leaders. And so we must focus on who we elect and whether they have the capacity and the ethical commitment to doing the right thing. And it brings me back to what I said earlier. Chapter 2 of our Constitution is the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights is South Africa's commitment and promise to every single citizen in our country. And it includes the right to water, the right to education, the right to housing, the right to food, the right to basic income support. It has got all of those rights in it. And until you find leaders who embody Chapter 2 of the Constitution and see their election as a mandate to implement that chapter, citizens will continue to experience poor services. So our message really is: elect new leaders, and Unite for Change will put up those leaders who embody the constitutional rights of South Africans, who see that election as their mandate to implement those rights and Chapter 2 of the Constitution.
Brett, one final question. As somebody who's, committed towards the city of Cape Town, there's this planned building of a wall by, of course, the Democratic Alliance. The DA have argued that this is to obviously stop crime or criminal elements coming from many of the townships. Some have argued that this is really hiding the poverty that Cape Town has. What is Good Party's take on this?
I think it is the prime example of poor leadership, because there is in urban planning and urban thinking a concept called crime prevention through environmental design. And crime prevention through environmental design is exactly this: building infrastructure in a way to prevent crime. And the thinking around that philosophy is that walls do not solve crime. And the city of Cape Town has its own examples of where they used the building of infrastructure, the building of houses, the building of libraries, the building of community facilities to prevent crime. It was called violence prevention through urban upgrade. So we've been saying no to the wall, take the money and rather invest in upgrading those informal settlements with housing, with community facilities, with roads, with social amenities, and that itself will reduce crime for all Cape Townians. But more importantly, even if you design the infrastructure correctly, and if you believe really that a barrier is needed to the highway, you can design buildings in a way that they are the barrier to the highway.
Brett Herron, always good having you, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
That's Brett Herron, the Secretary General of the Good Party. Do stay tuned to us here on Hilaal TV. We'll have more for you from the State of the Nation 2026.